Feuerbach. He said something interesting, and I forget the exact phrasing. Sometimes you go out there and you give $10 to a homeless person or someone who's needy, and then you run into the same person the following week and just look the other way, you don't even care. He said that what we do is this. All of us in this class long for the permanence of compassion and generosity, but we see ourselves lacking and inconsistent. So what we do, we take this compassion that comes to me once in a while and we throw it up there. Beauty up there, wisdom up there. And you realize that, well, when you throw these goods up there, someone needs to hold them. And we give that person this name God or a superhero. Superman is never going to shy away from helping someone in need. He is consistent, something that you and I don't have. It may be because we are desperately looking for consistency and stability, but we can't really generate that, so we have no choice but to create certain fantasies. I don't know why Moses became so popular and so famous and we worship him. I mean, he killed a lot of people. So did Muhammad. At the same time, you have pieces of advertisement supporting both the good and the bad. But there is something about us, I think, that desperately desires someone who's more than human. Can I tell you a story? It's going to be a little weird. You guys all know who Rumi is, right? The great Sufi mystic. He saw God and he played with God and he wrote books. So let me tell you a story. There's a woman who's sitting on the sofa having some Dijon chips with yogurt, and all of a sudden she hears this noise coming from the outside, and it's very distracting. It keeps her from watching her movie. So she opens the sliding door to kind of hear this noise a bit more clear and better, and she can't believe what she's hearing. Her neighbor in the backyard, oh, ooh, ooh. Does that sound familiar? She was having lots of fun. And she grew very, very jealous. And she was intensely overcome with pleasure. She said, I've been married all these years. And I've been doing this stuff with my husband all these years. I've never, ever, ever been able to make such sounds. I wonder what position they're doing it. Maybe I can tell my husband to repeat, and do those positions. So she peeks through the hole in the fence and she comes to realize that this neighbor of hers, this young woman, is having sex with a donkey. And she says, oh my God, this is amazing. I didn't know donkeys can do those things. So being envious and jealous, she goes to Lakeshore and buys herself a nice little donkey from Trader Joe's. She comes home, feeds the donkey some carrot, and she takes a shower, wears her robe, goes to the backyard, disrobes, looks at the donkey and says, honey, I'm ready for you. The donkey, of course, penetrates, and she's immediately taken to Highland Hospital. She doesn't die, but she recovers after a couple of weeks. Angrily, she walks to her neighbor's house and says, I saw you doing it with a donkey, and you were having so much fun. I did it as well. I ended up in hospital. And her neighbor looks at her and says, well, didn't you see the watermelon? The woman says, watermelon? What are you talking about? You didn't see the watermelon? And the story ends. Now, someone who has a certain view, certain perspective, certain position as to how philosophers or mystics should be and should behave, they're going to hear the story and say, Middle Easterners, there's a reason why they're so backwards. Why would anyone come up with such a ridiculous, insulting, offensive story? Mystics should be like Jesus Christ, like Saint Francis of Assisi. You should never talk about sex. Think about sex. Read some of the works of the Christian Desert Fathers. If I was to unpack the metaphors and the symbolism, would be the following. The panting that this woman is hearing is about a student who wanted intimacy with a good amount of intensity, connection, relatability, but was never able to find it. He wanted union with God, So he has this yearning, and he hears someone having this intimacy. It's a good envy, and it's a good lust to have. And this person peeks through this hole through the fence. All of us in this class, we only have tiny little perspectives. We have no clarity about anything. We have a series of assumptions, that's all we have. If you have ever seen a donkey's private part, it is huge. For Rumi, the donkey's penis is a metaphor for the grandness and the awesomeness of God. The watermelon is a teacher, is a prophet. Only he or she knows how much of God you and I have the capacity to receive. You can't just sit and say, God, show yourself to me. Because if God was to show all of himself, you will combust. So you just need a little bit. And that little bit will carry you for your entire life, if not a few lifetimes. You don't hear that story very often in the Persian world. We don't even hear too many people quoting from Book 5, which is a book that has so many images of pornography in it. And yet he's able to use all those human activities in a way that becomes profoundly divine and poetic. Rumi can do that because he's a superhero, because we don't see him as a human being, because there is a story about him that him and his teacher locked themselves in a room for 2 months. No one knows what happened. Maybe they had sex, who the hell knows? But the outcome was a changed human being, Rumi was. And so he uses whatever is out there to make the rest of us a bit more aware. So the watermelon, the donkey's penis has to go through the watermelon and then to the woman. Now, if you happen to have a great capacity for wisdom, you get a smaller watermelon and a bigger donkey. If on the other hand, you don't have a great capacity, you buy a huge watermelon and then a little donkey. You know, it's kind of like if you have a 2-year-old son who comes to you and says, Dad, what's sex? Well, you have to give a huge watermelon because you say, well, it's honey, it's like ice cream. If on the other hand, your son or your daughter is at a certain age that could pose some dangerousness, that they can go out there and do something naughty, but then you get a smaller watermelon. You give them a bit more reality. You shouldn't talk to them like adults. We do this all the time. There is a book, Invisible Way. There's a first volume to this book, which is called The Last Barrier. There was a Western guy in Turkey looking for antiques, goes into a shop. It was closing time, and just asks an irrelevant question, which is to the owner, do you know anything about the dervishes? Not knowing that he's talking to a teacher. The second volume has a story in it, which is there is a woman, a young woman whose name is Noor. She hangs out with this teacher. They never talk about religion or philosophy, but what Rashad Field, this Westerner, comes to understand later on is that this woman was given a bit too much when she was not ready, and her interior couldn't take it. So psychologically she broke. Let me give this to you in a perhaps more digestible way. Imagine you are 18 and you accidentally run into a 45-year-old man. Now you're in high school, let's just say, or your first year of college, you're 18. And tradition, custom usually is hang out with your own kind. That go out with 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds. And both of you can suffer a good amount of confusion and then heartache, all that. But you run into this 45-year-old man, and he's very, very, very mature. Now, something about women from a very, very young age, perhaps maybe they know, maybe they don't know, but they long for stability because they're a carrier of potential being a mother. Okay? They're like an oven, and they know this from a very, very young age. So they're always looking for someone who could be dependable and stable, like a rock, Peter. And so you realize that this 45-year-old, for whatever the reasons are, even though you're very scared to tell your parents that you're dating a 45-year-old, nevertheless, you continue dating and eventually you get married. The beautiful man. A year into the marriage, he dies. He gets ran over by an 18-wheeler, an ugly-looking truck. You feel sad. And after you have overcome your grief, you say, all right, I'm young, I'm only 19, maybe 20. I should go out there and find myself a date. The problem that you have is you didn't go out with a loser. You went out with someone who's profoundly mature. At the age of 19, you have a standard that's up here. All the people your own age or close to your own age, their standards are even below you. And so there's a good chance that you will never find a man like the one you had. So you only have to find a way to be okay with someone who's lesser and just tolerate it. What you have in this woman, this young woman in the book, or anyone who's given too much at the wrong time, is that you can break them to the point of no return. So you have to be very, very careful, and wisdom can do that. You know, once you begin to question, seriously question love, there's a good chance you will become paralyzed for the rest of your life, because you're looking for this ideal that can't be found down here.